Some goodbyes come too late, and some secrets refuse to die with those we've lost. For 30 years, Greta Wynn lived alone in the Smoky Mountains, running from a past she couldn't bear to face. Now she's returned to bury her mother in a forgotten cemetery deep in the woods. But at the graveside, two homeless twin girls appear from nowhere, ragged and silent. They say they were told to wait for the mountain woman. Then one of them whispers something that makes Greta collapse, words only her dead mother knew. Who are these children? What did her mother hide all these years? And why were they sent to find her? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning Greta Wynn received word that her mother had died, she was splitting firewood behind her cabin. 10 miles from the nearest road and 30 years from the life she'd left behind. The letter came by way of old Samuel Cord, one of the few people who knew where to find her. He made the climb twice a year, bringing mail that had accumulated at the post office in Ridgemont, the town she'd abandoned in 1995. Most times the envelopes contained nothing but junk, advertisements for credit cards, appeals from charities, the endless churn of a world that hadn't noticed her absence. This time, the envelope bore the letterhead of Ridgemont County Hospital. Greta wiped the sweat from her brow and took the letter with hands that had grown calloused and strong from 3 decades of mountain living. Samuel waited at a respectful distance, understanding that whatever news traveled up this mountain was rarely welcome. "Your mother passed 4 days ago," the letter stated in the clinical language of administrators. "Services pending family notification. Please contact the funeral director at your earliest convenience." She read it twice, standing in the morning sun with wood chips clinging to her flannel shirt. Her mother. A woman she hadn't spoken to in 30 years. A woman whose face she could barely remember now, worn smooth by time and deliberate forgetting. "Bad news?" Samuel asked quietly. "My mother died." The words felt strange in her mouth, neither sad nor relieved, just factual. Another piece of the past settling into its final place. Samuel nodded slowly. He was 70 now, had known Greta since she first arrived in these mountains, wild-eyed and running from something she never named. He'd respected her silence then and respected it now. "Will you go down?" he asked. Greta looked toward the peaks that surrounded her property, the familiar ridges that had sheltered her for most of her adult life. Up here she'd built something solid, a life of her own making. Down there in the valleys and towns lay everything she'd fled from. "I suppose I have to," she said finally. Samuel left her with the letter, and Greta spent the rest of the day finishing her chores with mechanical precision. The chickens needed feeding, the garden needed weeding, the rain barrels needed checking. Life on the mountain demanded constant attention, and she'd learned long ago that routine kept the darkness at bay. But that night, sitting by the fire with her leather-bound journal open on her lap, she couldn't write. The journal had been her companion for 30 years, filled with observations about weather patterns, animal behavior, the changing seasons, practical things, safe things. Tonight, the blank page stared back at her like an accusation. Her mother, Margaret Wynn, who would be 79 now if the math was right. Greta tried to summon a clear memory and found only fragments. Her mother's hands kneading bread dough, the smell of lavender sachets in dresser drawers, a voice singing hymns on Sunday mornings. And then later her mother's face tight with secrets, eyes that wouldn't meet hers, conversations that died in uncomfortable silences. The reason Greta had left. She closed the journal and stared into the fire. Tomorrow she would begin the journey down the mountain. Not because she wanted to, but because certain debts followed you no matter how far you ran. Even 30 years and 10 miles of wilderness couldn't erase the fundamental truth. Margaret Wynn had been her mother, and now she was dead, and someone had to bury her. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Greta packed a small bag, clean clothes, her identification papers kept sealed in a waterproof pouch, the letter from the hospital. She locked the cabin, an unnecessary precaution this far from civilization. But old habits died hard and began the descent. The trail down was treacherous in places, eroded by 3 decades of spring runoffs and winter freezes. Greta navigated it with the sure-footedness of someone who'd walked these paths in every season, every weather. She knew where the rocks shifted under weight, where roots lay hidden beneath leaves, where the mountain would hold you and where it would let you fall. By noon she reached the fire road where she kept her truck, a 1987 Ford that Samuel kept running for her with spare parts and stubborn determination. The battery was dead, always was, after sitting for months, but she'd brought jumper cables and a portable charger. 30 minutes later, the engine coughed to life. The drive into Ridgemont took 2 hours over rough roads that wound through national forest land. Greta watched the landscape change as she descended, high peaks giving way to rolling hills, dense hemlock forests opening into mixed hardwoods, the air growing thicker and warmer with every mile. She hadn't been back to Ridgemont in 30 years, but she remembered the way. Some paths stay carved in your mind, no matter how hard you try to forget them. The town appeared around a bend in the road, like something from a faded photograph. It hadn't grown. If anything, it had shrunk. Buildings more weathered, paint more faded, fewer cars on Main Street. The coal mines had closed in the 80s, and nothing had come to replace them. Young people left for cities with jobs and futures. The ones who remained grew old, waiting for prosperity that never arrived. Greta drove slowly through the downtown, past the courthouse with its sagging columns, the general store with its rusted Coca-Cola sign, the diner where she'd worked summers during high school. A few people stood on corners or sat on benches, and she kept her eyes forward, not wanting to be recognized. Not yet. The funeral home sat at the end of Maple Street, a Victorian house converted to its somber purpose. Greta parked and sat for a moment, gathering herself. Through the windshield, she could see a man in a dark suit tending to the flowers by the entrance. Beyond him, the building waited with the patient stillness of a place accustomed to grief. She got out and walked to the door. The funeral director, a soft-spoken man named Howard Petty, greeted her with professional sympathy. Yes, he'd been expecting her. Yes, the arrangements were quite simple. Her mother had prepaid for everything years ago. No service, just a burial in the family plot at Pine Haven Cemetery. Would tomorrow morning be acceptable? Greta agreed to everything. She signed papers without reading them carefully, made decisions without caring about the details. Casket? The simplest. Flowers? None needed. Headstone? Whatever was standard. Howard watched her with gentle concern. Is there anyone we should notify? Other family members? No, Greta said. There's no one else. That wasn't quite true, but it was true enough. Whatever family had existed had fractured long ago, scattered by secrets and silence and choices that couldn't be undone. She left the funeral home and drove to the one motel on the edge of town. The clerk, a young man who couldn't have been born when Greta left, barely looked at her as he processed the credit card she rarely used. Room 12, ground floor, facing the parking lot. The room smelled of disinfectant and old cigarette smoke, masked by air freshener. Greta sat on the bed and felt the weight of 30 years pressing down on her. Tomorrow she would bury her mother. Tomorrow she would close this final chapter and return to her mountain, to the life she'd built from solitude and determination. She told herself it would be simple, clean, a quick trip down, a quick ceremony, then back to the safety of elevation and isolation. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow, at her mother's graveside, everything she thought she'd left behind would come rushing back. That 2 silent girls with hollow eyes would appear like ghosts from a past she'd never fully understood. That words spoken by a child would shatter 30 years of carefully maintained distance. That night, Greta dreamed of her mother for the first time in decades. In the dream, Margaret stood at the edge of a forest calling her name. But when Greta tried to approach, her mother turned and walked into the trees, disappearing into shadows that seemed to swallow all light. Greta called after her, but her voice made no sound. She tried to follow, but the forest grew denser with each step, branches catching at her clothes, roots grabbing at her feet, until she couldn't move at all. She woke before dawn, heart pounding, the dream clinging to her like spiderwebs. Outside the motel window, Ridgemont slept under streetlights that buzzed and flickered. Somewhere in this town, her mother lay in a casket, waiting to be returned to the earth. Somewhere in these hills, secrets stirred like restless spirits. Greta rose and dressed in the dim light, pulling on the clean clothes she'd brought, dark pants, a simple blouse, a jacket against the morning chill. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a stranger, a woman of 58 with grey threading through brown hair, lines carved deep around eyes that had spent 30 years scanning horizons for threats that never came. This was who she'd become, a survivor, a hermit, a woman so thoroughly removed from the world that her own mother's death felt like distant news from a foreign country. She drove to Pine Haven Cemetery as the sun rose, painting the mountains in shades of amber and gold. The cemetery sat on a hillside outside town, old enough that many of the stones had been worn smooth by a century of weather. Howard Petty was already there with his assistant and the simple pine casket. No one else had come. The family plot was in a far corner, beneath an oak tree that must have been ancient even when Greta was young. Her grandparents were buried here, names she barely remembered. Her father, too, dead from a heart attack when she was 12. And now her mother would join them, completing the generation. Howard conducted a brief ceremony, reading from a small book of standard phrases about rest and peace and eternal comfort. Greta stood with her hands clasped in front of her, neither praying nor crying, just waiting for it to be over. The casket was lowered. The first shovel of dirt hit the wood with a hollow sound that echoed across the hillside, and that was when Greta saw them. 2 girls, standing at the edge of the cemetery where the mowed grass met the wild forest. Identical twins, she realized immediately. No more than 13 years old, both wearing clothes that were too big and too dirty, their hair tangled and unkempt. They stood perfectly still, watching the burial with an intensity that made Greta's skin prickle with instinctive alarm. Howard was saying something about paperwork that needed to be signed back at the funeral home. Greta nodded without listening, her attention fixed on the girls. They hadn't moved. They just stood there, silent and strange, like something that had emerged from the forest itself. The ceremony ended. Howard and his assistant gathered their equipment and headed toward their vehicle. Greta remained at the graveside, watching the girls watch her. Then slowly they began to walk toward her. Every instinct, honed by 30 years of solitary survival, told Greta to be wary. These children were wrong somehow, too still, too focused, appearing in this forgotten cemetery as if they'd been waiting specifically for this moment. As they approached, details emerged. The mud streaked on their clothes and skin, the hollowness of their cheeks, the way they moved in perfect synchronization, as if they were 2 parts of a single being. But most striking were their eyes, dark and knowing, holding something ancient and sad that no child should carry. They stopped 10 feet from Greta, beside the fresh mound of earth that covered her mother's casket. For a long moment, no one spoke. The morning birds sang in the oak tree. The wind moved through the grass. The mountains stood witness to a meeting that felt both impossible and inevitable. Finally, one of the girls, the slightly taller one, though they were nearly identical, spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "We were told to wait here for the mountain woman," she said. "We were told she would come." Greta stared at the 2 girls, her mind working through possibilities with the methodical caution she'd developed in the wilderness. Lost hikers, though these woods weren't the kind people hiked for pleasure. Runaways from somewhere nearby. Or something worse, victims of neglect or abuse, judging from their condition. "Who told you that?" Greta asked, keeping her voice level and calm. The girls exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them. The shorter one, though shorter by barely an inch, remained silent, her eyes fixed on Greta with an unnerving steadiness. The taller one spoke again. "A woman. She said to come to this cemetery and wait by the stone with the name Greta Wynn. She said the mountain woman would come to bury her mother, and that we should find her." A chill ran down Greta's spine, despite the warming morning air. "What woman? When did she tell you this?" "Before." The girl's answer was frustratingly vague. Before she couldn't tell us anything anymore, Greta took a careful step closer, studying them more carefully now. Identical faces, both oval with high cheekbones. Dark hair that might be brown or black under the dirt and tangles. Clothes that had once been decent. Someone had dressed them well before whatever had brought them to this state. "What are your names?" Greta asked. The girls looked at each other again. After a moment, the taller one said, "We're the twins." "That's what everyone calls us?" "Everyone who?" No answer. The silent one continued to stare at Greta with those two knowing eyes. Greta changed tactics. "How long have you been out here?" "Where are your parents?" "We don't have parents anymore," the speaking twin said. This time, her voice carried the flat certainty of accepted fact. "Our mother died. The woman who told us about you, she was our mother." The pieces began to arrange themselves into a picture Greta didn't understand. Two orphaned girls, sent by their dying mother to wait at a cemetery for a stranger. It made no sense unless, what did this woman, your mother, tell you about me? Why did she send you here? The girls remained silent now, both of them watching Greta with that same intense focus. She felt assessed, measured against some standard they carried inside them. Greta's patience, never abundant, began to fray. "Look, I don't know what game this is, but I need to get back to—" She said to tell you, the starling never forgot its song. The words came from the quiet twin. Her first spoken sounds, delivered in a voice so soft Greta almost missed them. But she didn't miss them. Couldn't miss them. Because those words hit her like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs and the strength from her legs, she staggered, catching herself against her mother's headstone, the granite rough under her palm. The world tilted and blurred. The starling never forgot its song, a phrase from 40 years ago. A private thing between her and her mother, from the years before everything went wrong. Greta had been 7 or 8, upset about something. She couldn't even remember what now. Her mother had held her on the porch swing and told her the story of a starling they'd raised one summer after it fell from its nest. The bird had learned to mimic the songs of other birds, confused about its own identity. But when they released it, it had found other starlings and remembered what it truly was. Even when they forget for a while, her mother had said, starlings remember their song. You'll remember yours too, Greta. No matter what happens, you'll remember who you really are. It had become their private phrase after that, repeated in moments of doubt or fear. Her mother's way of saying that identity survived, that truth persisted, that what was real couldn't be erased. No one else had known about it. No one. Greta had never told anyone, and her mother, how do you know those words? Greta's voice came out harsh, demanding. Who told you to say that? Our mother, the speaking twin repeated. Before she died, she made us memorize it. She said it was important. She said you would understand what it meant. Greta's mind raced. Her mother must have told someone. But Margaret Wynn had been in a nursing home with dementia for the last 5 years, according to the hospital letter. Before that, she'd lived alone in Ridgemont, isolated by whatever secrets she carried. Who could she have told? And why would that person's daughter send these children here now? Unless... Greta looked at the girls more carefully, searching their faces for something she might have missed. The shape of the eyes, the line of the jaw. Something familiar that she couldn't quite place. What was your mother's name? She asked. The twins exchanged another glance. The taller one answered, Stella. Stella Wynn. Wynn, the family name. But Greta had no knowledge of any Stella in the family tree. Her father had been an only child. Her mother had one sister who disappeared. The memory came back slowly, dredged up from decades of deliberate forgetting. Her mother's younger sister, Violet. There had been whispers about her when Greta was young, fragments of adult conversations not meant for children's ears. Violet had run away at 19, and the family never spoke of her again. Greta's grandfather had forbidden her name to be mentioned in his presence. Could Violet have had a daughter? Could that daughter have been named Stella? The morning sun climbed higher, warming the cemetery. Birds sang in the trees. The ordinary world continued around them while Greta stood frozen, her carefully constructed isolation cracking like ice under spring thaw. "Where have you been staying?" she finally asked. "How long have you been here?" "In the woods," the speaking twin said. "We've been waiting for 3 weeks. Our mother said you'd come eventually, that you'd have to come when your mother died." 3 weeks. These children had been living in the forest for 3 weeks, waiting for her. The thought made Greta's stomach turn. She looked down at her mother's grave, at the freshly turned earth that covered 30 years of secrets. What had Margaret Wynn known? What connections had she maintained in silence, even as dementia stole her other memories? And what kind of woman sent 2 young girls alone into the wilderness to wait at a cemetery for a stranger? A desperate one, Greta realized. A woman with no other options. The twins waited patiently for her decision. They seemed accustomed to waiting, to silence, to uncertainty. It was there in the way they stood, in the quiet acceptance on their faces. These were children who had learned not to expect much from the world. Greta's first instinct was to walk away. Call social services, report abandoned children, let the system handle it. She had no obligation to these girls. No connection beyond a shared surname and an impossible phrase they shouldn't have known. But 30 years of solitude hadn't completely erased her humanity. She looked at them standing there in their mud-streaked clothes, too thin and too wary, and saw what they were beneath the mystery. Frightened children with nowhere else to go, and they had known her mother's words. Somehow, impossibly, they carried a piece of the past that Greta thought she'd left buried. "Have you eaten?" she asked. The girls shook their heads in unison. Greta sighed, feeling the weight of a decision she didn't want to make, but couldn't avoid. "I need to take you into town, to the sheriff's office. They'll know what to do, how to find your relatives, or—" "No!" The force in the speaking twin's voice surprised Greta. She said not to trust the sheriff. She said he's one of them. One of who? The girl's expression closed down, shutting Greta out. "We can't tell you yet. We were supposed to wait until you brought us somewhere safe." This was getting more complicated by the moment, layers of mystery piling on mystery. Greta felt the familiar urge to retreat, to head back up the mountain, where life made sense and strangers didn't appear with impossible knowledge and cryptic warnings. But she couldn't leave them here. Whatever else was true, these children needed help. "All right," Greta said slowly. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm taking you to get food and clean clothes. Then we're going to my mother's house. It's empty now, on the edge of town. You can rest there while I figure out what to do next. But I want answers. Real ones, understood?" The twins nodded together. Perfect synchronization again. "And you're going to tell me your real names," Greta added. "Not the twins, your actual names." The girls looked at each other one more time. Some silent debate seemed to occur. Finally, the speaking twin said, "She told us not to use our names. She said it wasn't safe." "Well, I'm not calling you the twins," Greta said firmly. "So, you'll have to trust me with them eventually." The quiet one spoke for the second time, her voice still barely audible. "Trust has to be earned." It was such an adult sentiment, delivered in such a young voice, that Greta felt another chill run through her. What had these children been through? What had their mother, this mysterious Stella Wynn, prepared them for? She gathered her few belongings from where she'd set them by the graveside. The twins picked up a small bundle from the edge of the woods, everything they owned, apparently, wrapped in a torn blanket. As they walked toward Greta's truck, she cast one last look at her mother's grave. The earth was still raw and exposed, waiting for grass to grow and weather to smooth it. Waiting to become just another forgotten stone in a forgotten cemetery. But whatever secrets Margaret Wynn had taken to that grave, she'd left enough breadcrumbs behind to bring her daughter face to face with a past she'd never fully understood. The twins climbed into the truck without hesitation, settling into the bench seat, like this was just another step in a journey they'd already mapped out. Greta started the engine and pulled away from the cemetery, watching the girls in her peripheral vision. They sat close together, shoulders touching, staring out the windshield with identical expressions of wary hope. And Greta realized, with the sinking certainty of someone who'd just made a choice she couldn't unmake. That her simple trip down the mountain had just become something far more complicated. The past, it seemed, wasn't content to stay buried after all. Morning came with unexpected softness. Greta woke on the couch where she'd dozed fitfully, her body protesting the unfamiliar angles. Upstairs, she could hear quiet movement. The twins were already awake. She'd managed to get supplies the previous evening: bread, cheese, canned goods, water. The truck still sat broken on Route 43, but she'd called Samuel from a payphone and asked him to arrange a tow. The mechanic said 2 days minimum for parts. 2 days trapped in Ridgemont. 2 days in this house full of memories she worked hard to forget. She found the twins sitting together on the bed in the spare room, speaking in whispers that stopped when she appeared in the doorway. "There's food downstairs," Greta said. "Real food this time." They followed her down and ate with the same careful slowness they'd shown with the apple, making each bite count, wasting nothing. As Greta watched them, she realized they had better table manners than most children. Someone had taught them properly, cared about their behavior and upbringing. Yet here they were, filthy and half-starved. "I need to take you to Sheriff Reeves," Greta said as they finished eating. "I know your mother said not to trust him, but I can't just keep 2 children without notifying anyone." "If you're reported missing somewhere, we're not," the speaking twin interrupted. "No one's looking for us. No one even knows we exist." That statement hung in the air, heavy with implications. "Everyone exists," Greta said carefully. "You have birth certificates, medical records. We don't." The quiet twin spoke, her voice gaining strength. "Our mother kept us hidden. She said it was safer that way." Greta felt a chill despite the warming morning. Children hidden from official records. A mother desperate enough to send them alone into the wilderness. And now that phrase again, safer. Hidden from who? She asked. The twins exchanged their now familiar glance. After a long moment, the speaking twin said, "From the family." "What family?" "Our family. The Wynns. The family council," the quiet twin clarified. "That's what our mother called them. She said they took children. She said they took her when she was little, and they'd take us too if they found us." Greta sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Family council. The words stirred something in her memory. Fragments of conversations overheard in childhood. Her grandfather presiding over meetings in the basement. Her mother's fearful expression when he'd call her down to discuss family business. Greta had been forbidden from those meetings, but she'd listened at the top of the stairs sometimes, catching words that didn't quite make sense. Placement, selection, contributions. She'd thought it was some kind of private family governance, old-fashioned patriarchy that died with her grandfather. But what if it had been something darker? "I need to show you something," Greta said. She led them to her mother's desk and the folders of newspaper clippings. But as she opened the drawers, searching for anything else useful, her hand touched something at the very back, an envelope unsealed, with writing on the outside that made her freeze. To V it said, in her mother's handwriting, B. Violet. With shaking fingers, Greta pulled out the letter inside. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded but readable. She sat down and began to read aloud. "Dear V, I don't know if this will ever reach you, or if you'll forgive me for what I've done. I made a choice to protect the girls, and I pray it was the right one. The council doesn't know about them yet. They think Stella disappeared completely when she ran. I've been putting them off, telling them I have no information, but Brandon asks questions. He's suspicious. I'm sending this through the old channels, hoping it reaches you wherever you are now. Keep them hidden. Keep them safe. Don't let them take the girls like they took so many others. The family burden is mine to bear, but I won't let it fall on another generation. I'm sorry I betrayed you all those years ago. I was young and frightened and believed Father when he said it was for your own good. I know better now. I've known better for a long time. By the time you read this, the disease will have taken most of my memory. I'm writing while I still can. Tell Stella I'm sorry. Tell the girls, if they're old enough to understand, that their grandmother Margaret did love them, even though she never met them. And tell Greta, if you ever find her, that I never stopped looking, that I understood why she ran. That I should have run too all those years ago. The starling never forgot its song. V, neither did I. I just forgot how to sing it. The letter ended there, dated 5 years earlier. Greta read it twice, her heart pounding with each revelation. Her mother had known about the twins, had been protecting them from something called the Family Council, had regretted betraying Violet. And she'd been looking for Greta all along, even as the dementia stole her capacity to act on that searching. Your mother wrote this, Greta said to the twins. My mother wrote to your grandmother Violet. We know, the speaking twin said. Our mother had one too. She read it to us before she died. What did it say? That if anything happened to her, we should find you. That you were the only one who escaped the council. That you'd understand, and maybe you'd protect us the way you couldn't protect yourself back then. Greta's mouth went dry. What does that mean? What happened back then? The twins looked at her with something approaching pity in their young eyes. The quiet one said gently, You really don't remember, do you? What they took from you? Tell me. But before they could answer, the sound of a vehicle approaching cut through the morning air. Greta moved to the window and looked out at the overgrown driveway. A sheriff's department cruiser was pulling up to the house. Duncan Reeves climbed out, still wearing the uniform that had grown tighter around his middle over the years. He'd been a deputy when Greta left town. Now he was sheriff according to the patch on his sleeve. Stay here, Greta told the twins. Don't come down unless I call for you. She met Duncan on the porch, intercepting him before he could knock. He looked surprised to see her. Then something else flickered across his face, recognition followed by what might have been concern. Greta Wynn, he said. I heard you were back. I'm sorry about your mother. Thank you. She kept her voice neutral, guarded. I also heard you've been asking around town. And someone reported seeing you with 2 young girls yesterday. He paused, watching her carefully. Mind if I ask about that? They're relatives, Greta said. Distant ones. They needed a place to stay. Relatives. Duncan's expression remained professionally pleasant, but his eyes had gone sharp. Do these relatives have names? Ages? Any identification? They're staying temporarily while I sort out my mother's estate. Greta, Duncan's voice lowered. If you found something or someone that's connected to the old days, you need to tell me. For your own safety. The warning was clear in his tone. The old days. He knew something about what had happened 30 years ago, about why she'd fled. I don't know what you're talking about, Greta said. Duncan glanced past her toward the house, and Greta saw him notice something, a small hand pulling back from the upstairs window. One of the twins had been watching, his face hardened. Those girls are in danger. So are you, if you're protecting them. And from who? From people who don't like things stirred up. From history that should stay buried. He met her eyes directly. From the same things that made you run all those years ago. Before Greta could respond, Duncan's radio crackled. A voice spoke quickly, reporting something that made him tense. He acknowledged the call and turned back to Greta. I have to go. But listen to me carefully. If you found children connected to the Wynn family, particularly through Violet's line, there are people who'll want to know about it. People who won't be as gentle as I'm being right now. My advice? Take those girls and disappear back up your mountain. Don't ask questions. Don't look for answers. Just go. He walked back to his cruiser, leaving Greta standing on the porch with more questions than she'd started with. As he drove away, she noticed he didn't head back toward town. He turned onto a side road that led deeper into the county. She went back inside to find both twins standing at the top of the stairs. He's one of them, the speaking twin said. The council. Our mother warned us about him specifically, but he just told me to run, Greta said. If he's part of whatever this is, why would he warn me? The quiet twin came down the stairs slowly, her expression older than her years. Because sometimes the people who do bad things convince themselves they have good reasons. Sometimes they try to protect individuals while serving the system. It was a remarkably sophisticated observation from someone so young. But then, Greta was beginning to understand that these children had been forced to grow up faster than anyone should. She looked at the letter in her hand, at the twins watching her with wary hope, and felt the weight of a decision settling on her shoulders. She could do what Duncan suggested, take the girls, return to her mountain, hide them away from whatever threat pursued them. It would be the safe choice, the isolated choice, the choice she'd made 30 years ago when she'd run rather than fight, or she could stay. She could dig into these mysteries. She could find out what the family council really was, what they'd done, and what they'd taken from her that she couldn't even remember. The starling never forgot its song. That's what her mother had written. Maybe it was time for Greta to remember hers. The county records office occupied the basement of the courthouse, a maze of filing cabinets and dusty ledgers maintained by Harriet Oakes, who had held the position for longer than most residents could remember. Greta brought the twins with her, keeping them close, their hands clutching hers as they descended the worn stone steps. Harriet looked up from her desk, her face creasing with recognition beneath her white hair. "Greta Wynn, Lord have mercy, I never thought I'd see you darken this doorway again." "Hello, Harriet." Greta approached the desk while the twins hung back, watchful and silent. "I need to look at some property records. Family property, specifically." Harriet's eyes shifted to the twins, lingering there with an expression Greta couldn't quite read. "Family business, is it? What kind of property?" "Anything under my mother's name. Margaret Wynn and—" Greta hesitated. "Anything connected to Violet Wynn." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Harriet's hand, reaching for a filing drawer, froze in midair. "Violet. No, that's a name I haven't heard spoken aloud in this office for 35 years. You knew her?" "I knew of her. Your grandmother and I were friends once upon a time. Before—" Harriet stopped herself, glancing again at the twins. "Before things got complicated. What exactly are you looking for, child?" "I don't know yet," Greta admitted. "But my mother kept secrets. I'm trying to understand what they were." Harriet studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to some internal decision. She rose from her desk with the careful movements of someone whose joints had seen too many winters. "Property records are public," she said. "Though some folks prefer certain records stay forgotten." She led them to a section of cabinets labeled with dates from the 1980s. "Your mother's holdings would be here. Let me see." Her gnarled fingers worked through files with surprising speed, pulling folders and laying them on a nearby table. Greta leaned over them, scanning deeds and tax records. Most were familiar: the house where they'd been staying, a plot in the cemetery, a few acres of woodland. Then Harriet pulled another folder from a different cabinet. "Now this one's interesting. Purchased 35 years ago, taxes paid up through last year." Greta opened the folder and felt her breath catch. "A property deed for 40 acres in the remote northern part of the county, purchased by Margaret Wynn in 1990. The location was marked on an attached survey map, deep in the mountains, accessible only by logging roads. Far from any town or settlement. I never knew she owned this," Greta said. "Most folks didn't. Your mother was careful about keeping it quiet." Harriet lowered her voice. "Some families have two histories, Greta. The one they tell and the one they hide. The Wynns have always been more the hiding kind. What does that mean?" But Harriet had already turned away, returning to her desk. "I'm just saying some stones are better left unturned." "Your mother had her reasons for secrecy." Greta felt frustration rising. "Everyone keeps telling me to leave things alone. Duncan said the same thing, but nobody will tell me what I'm supposed to be avoiding." Harriet's expression softened slightly. "Your grandfather, Martin Wynn, he was involved in things. Not illegal exactly, but not right either. Back in the 60s and 70s, there was a group, they called it the Family Council. Rich families from around the county, claiming they were helping poor families by—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I've said too much already. By what?" Greta pressed. "By placing children with better families. That's what they called it. Adoption without the legal red tape, without the oversight." Harriet's face had gone pale. "My own grandson, 20 years ago. His mother, my daughter, was struggling, living up in a hollow with no running water. The council came and said they could give him opportunities, a better life. Said it was temporary, just until she got on her feet. What happened? She never got him back. They said she'd signed papers, but she swears she didn't. She didn't understand what she was signing. They gave him to a family in Charleston, and by the time we tried to fight it, the law was on their side somehow. Judges, lawyers, they all had connections to the council families. The twins had crept closer during this conversation, listening intently. The speaking twin said quietly, "They took our mother that way too. Took her from Violet when she was a baby." Harriet's head snapped up, staring at the girls with sudden intensity. "Violet's grandchildren? Lord above. You're Stella's daughters?" "You knew our mother?" The quiet twin asked. "I knew of her. Violet reached out to me once, years ago, asking for help tracking down her daughter. By then the trail was cold." Harriet's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "So she found Stella eventually?" "Yes," the speaking twin said. "They had 10 years together before Violet died. Then our mother took care of us until she couldn't anymore." Greta finished for her. She looked at Harriet. "The council, is it still operating?" "I don't know. I hope not. But powerful families don't give up power easily, and the people who benefited from those placements, they'd have reason to keep things quiet." Harriet pulled another document from her desk drawer. "This came across my desk 5 years ago. A complaint filed by Violet Wynn against Martin Wynn, your grandfather, who in 1989, just before she disappeared." Greta took the document with trembling hands. The complaint alleged abuse, coercion, and involvement in illegal adoption practices. It named specific council members, including her grandfather. But the next page showed the complaint withdrawn 24 hours later, with Violet's signature probably forged, and a notation, "Matter resolved privately." "She fled the day after withdrawing this," Harriet said. "Your grandfather told everyone she was unstable, that she'd made false accusations. Most people believed him. He was a respected man in this community." Greta felt sick. Her grandfather, the man her mother had insisted she respect and obey, had been running a child trafficking operation disguised as private adoption. And her mother had known, had maybe even helped cover it up. "Where's this property?" Greta asked, tapping the deed for the 40 acres. "The one my mother bought?" Harriet gave her the coordinates. "It's remote. No power lines, no water service. Just forest and mountain. Why would she buy land out there?" But Greta was beginning to understand. A refuge, a safe house, somewhere Violet could hide when she escaped, where Stella could live outside the system, where children could exist without appearing in official records. Her mother, who'd been complicit in her father's crimes, had tried to make amends by creating a sanctuary for the victims. "We need to go there," Greta said. "It's a 3-hour drive on bad roads," Harriet warned. "And if the council is still watching, let them watch." Greta felt something hardening inside her, the same stubborn determination that had kept her alive through 30 mountain winters. "I need to see what my mother was protecting." They left the records office with copies of the deed and survey map. As they climbed the stairs back to street level, Greta noticed a man standing across the square, watching them. He was young, maybe 30, with the well-fed look of someone who'd never known real hardship. When he saw Greta looking, he pulled out a cell phone and made a call. "Who is that?" she asked Harriet, who'd followed them up. Harriet's face went tight with worry. "Kyle Brennan, Faye Brennan's grandson. His family came into money about 20 years ago, right around the time Faye lost her grandson to the council. Kyle runs the general store now. He's watching us." "Yes, he is. And he'll report to whoever's listening." Harriet gripped Greta's arm. "Be careful, child. If they know you're asking questions, if they know about those girls." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Greta walked the twins back to the house quickly, her mountain-trained awareness picking up details, cars that seemed to slow as they passed, faces turning to watch from windows, the prickling sensation of being observed. They'd stirred something up, shaken a hornet's nest that had been dormant for years. At the house, she gathered supplies, flashlights, water, food, a detailed map of the county. The twins watched her prepare with the calm acceptance of children accustomed to sudden departures. "We're going to the property," Greta told them. "We're going to find out what your mother wanted me to know." The speaking twin nodded. "She said there were papers there, documents, proof of what the council did. Why didn't she go to the police with them?" "Because the police were part of it. the quiet twin said. Our mother said the sheriff's father was an enforcer for the council. That's why we can't trust Duncan Reeves. He's protecting his father's legacy. Everything connected in ugly ways. The council, the sheriff's department, the judges and lawyers Harriet had mentioned, a network of complicity that had operated for decades, stealing children and calling it charity. And Greta's family had been at the center of it. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Greta loaded the truck. Samuel had gotten it towed and repaired faster than expected and helped the twins climb in. The property was 3 hours away, which meant they'd arrive after dark, but Greta had lived in darkness for 30 years. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. What she feared was the light, the truth that would illuminate exactly what her family had done, and what role she herself had played in all of this before her memory conveniently failed. Because the twins were right about one thing. Somewhere in her past, something had been taken from her. Something important enough that her mind had buried it completely. And she was beginning to suspect that when she found the truth at that remote property, she'd discover exactly what that something was. The mountain roads unwound before them, leading deeper into territory Greta had never explored. The twins sat close together in the seat beside her, silent and watchful as always. In the rearview mirror, headlights appeared and disappeared, vehicles that might be following or might just be locals heading home. Greta couldn't tell the difference anymore. 30 years of isolation had left her unprepared for the paranoia that came with having someone to protect. But she'd learn. She'd adapt. That's what she'd always done. And if the council wanted these children, they'd have to go through her first. The mountain woman had come down from her peak, and she wasn't leaving until she understood exactly what war she'd walked into. The logging road that led to the property hadn't been maintained in years. Greta's truck bounced over ruts and washouts, branches scraping against the doors as they pushed deeper into the forest. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, revealing twisted tree trunks and eyes that glinted from the shadows, deer or raccoons. Watching their passage, after 2 hours of rough travel, they reached a gate, simple steel posts with a chain and lock. Greta climbed out, examining the lock by flashlight. Recent scratches marked the metal. Someone had been here, and not long ago. She returned to the truck for bolt cutters, tools she'd brought from instinct rather than planning, and cut through the chain. The gate swung open with a groan of hinges. Another mile of even rougher road brought them to a clearing. A cabin sat in the center, small but solidly built, with solar panels on the roof and a water collection system along the eaves. This wasn't some abandoned shack. This was a maintained refuge, kept ready for occupants who might arrive at any time. Greta parked and told the twins to wait while she checked the structure. But as she approached the door, the quiet twin called out, 4279. Greta turned. What? The combination for the lock, 4279. A combination lock hung from the cabin door. Greta tried the numbers and the lock clicked open. How did you know that? Our mother told us, the speaking twin said. She said if we ever needed to come here, that was the code. Inside, the cabin was clean and organized. A single room with a bed, table, chairs, and shelves stocked with supplies. A wood stove for heat, lanterns for light, everything necessary for survival, but nothing superfluous. And on the table, locked in a small safe, sat their destination. The combination's the same, the quiet twin said from the doorway. Greta entered the numbers and opened the safe. Inside was a leather satchel, cracked with age but carefully preserved. She lifted it out and spread its contents across the table. Documents, dozens of them. Birth certificates with alterations visible under the lantern light. Legal papers with forged signatures. A ledger listing names, dates, and dollar amounts. Payments made for children, placed with families. Greta's hands shook as she worked through them. Here was proof of everything Harriet had hinted at. Systematic trafficking of children from poor families to wealthy ones, all disguised as private adoptions. The council had operated like a business, with her grandfather as one of the founding members. But deeper in the satchel, she found something that made her blood run cold. Birth certificates for twins, dated 13 years ago. Names redacted. Mother listed as Stella Wynn. Father, unknown. The certificates had notes attached. Selected for placement. Separated placement recommended for optimal integration. They'd planned to split the twins up, to give them to different families, erasing their connection to each other and their mother. Our mother fought them, the speaking twin said quietly. She'd come to stand beside Greta, looking at the documents with ancient eyes in a young face. She refused to let them take us. That's when she ran. How did she manage to keep you hidden for 13 years? Violet helped at first. Then after Violet died, our mother kept moving. Newtown every few months, always paying cash. Never enrolling us in school, teaching us herself from books. The girl's voice remained steady, reciting facts without emotion. She got sick last year, cancer. She didn't have insurance, couldn't go to a hospital without creating records. So her voice faltered. She held on as long as she could. Greta pulled the girl close, then reached for her sister, gathering both twins against her. They remained stiff for a moment before relaxing into the embrace, their carefully maintained defenses cracking. "You've been so brave," Greta said. "Both of you." She returned to the documents, forcing herself to read everything. The ledger was damning. Payments ranging from $5,000 to $50,000, depending on the child's age and desirability factors. Healthy infants commanded the highest prices, and there, near the bottom of a page from 30 years ago, she found an entry that stopped her heart. Female infant. Born March 15, 1995. Mother Greta Wynn. Placement Brandon and Caroline Blackwood, Charleston. Payment $35,000. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Greta had never had a child. She'd never been pregnant. March 1995 was when she'd fled to the mountains, running from the memory hit her like a physical blow. Brandon Thorne, her fiancé, the man she'd been planning to marry before she discovered what his family did, before she'd tried to report them and found out the authorities were complicit, before she'd fled into the wilderness with nothing but a backpack and fear. But that had been in January. By March, she'd been established in her cabin, alone and safe. She'd had no contact with anyone from Ridgemont, except she'd been sick that winter. Very sick, fever and delirium that had lasted weeks. A midwife from a nearby settlement had come to help her, brought by Samuel, who'd found her collapsed on a trail. And after that, there were gaps in her memory. Weeks she couldn't fully account for, covered by fog and fragments that never quite cohesive. "No," Greta whispered. "That's not possible." But her body knew what her mind had refused to accept. The scar on her abdomen that she'd always attributed to a fall. The strange emptiness that had haunted her for 30 years. A grief she couldn't name. The way she sometimes woke from dreams of holding something precious that vanished the moment she opened her eyes. She'd been pregnant when she fled, had given birth in that mountain cabin, and they'd taken her baby while she was too sick to stop them. The twins were watching her with pity in their eyes. "You didn't know," the speaking twin said softly. "Your mother wrote about it in the letter to Violet. She said they told you the baby died." Greta couldn't breathe. The cabin walls pressed in around her. 30 years. She'd lost 30 years with a child she'd never known existed. Who? She managed to ask. Who took her? Brandon Thorne arranged it, the quiet twin said. According to the documents, he paid the midwife to lie. He told you the baby was stillborn, then placed her with his cousin and his cousin's wife in Charleston. The Blackwoods. Greta had met them once at a family gathering. Wealthy, respectable, unable to have children of their own. What? Greta's voice broke. What was her name? What did they name my daughter? The twins looked at each other, then back at her. The speaking twin said gently, Lily Blackwood. And according to the most recent information in these files, she's 30 years old now. She lives in Ridgemont. She's a deputy sheriff, the quiet twin added. She works for Duncan Reeves. The irony was savage. Greta's stolen daughter had returned to the town where she was born, working for the son of a man who'd helped operate the council that trafficked her. And she had no idea Greta turned away from the twins, stumbling to the cabin door and out into the night air. The forest surrounded her, dark and indifferent. Somewhere in the branches an owl called. The wind moved through pine needles with a sound like whispered secrets. She'd spent 30 years alone on a mountain, believing she was protecting herself from a corrupt world. But the world had already taken the most precious thing from her before she'd even known it existed. Her mother had known. That's what the letter meant. Margaret Wynn had known about the baby, had maybe even tried to stop it, and then had carried that knowledge in silence for 30 years, while Greta hated her for sins she didn't fully understand. Footsteps behind her. The twins standing close. There's more, the speaking twin said. In the documents. Lily doesn't know she was taken. The Blackwoods never told her. They raised her believing she was legally adopted, that her birth mother chose to give her up. Does she know about the council? We don't think so. She seems to be, the quiet twin paused, choosing words carefully, an honest person. Our mother's notes suggest she joined the sheriff's department to help people. She doesn't know her whole life is built on lies. Greta turned back to them. Why did your mother tell you all this? Why send you to me with this information? Because you're the only one who escaped, the speaking twin said. You got away from Brandon Thorne. You survived outside the council's control. Our mother thought, she hesitated. She thought you might be strong enough to take them down, to expose what they did. And if that happens, my daughter's entire life gets destroyed in the process, Greta said bitterly. She finds out her parents stole her, that the man she works for is protecting a trafficking ring, that everything she believed about her identity was a lie. Yes, the quiet twin acknowledged. But she'd also learned the truth. And maybe truth is more important than comfortable lies. It was a hard wisdom for a child to speak, but these weren't ordinary children. They'd been forged in the same fire that had shaped Greta. Loss, betrayal, survival against impossible odds. A sound in the distance. An engine, growing closer. Greta's mountain instincts flared to life. Inside, now. They moved quickly, Greta gathering the documents and shoving them back into the satchel. She killed the lanterns, plunging the cabin into darkness. Through the window, she could see headlights bouncing along the logging road they'd just traveled. Someone had followed them, or someone had been monitoring the property, waiting for visitors. 3 men emerged from a pickup truck, and even in the darkness, Greta recognized one of them, Kyle Brennan from the general store. The one who'd been watching them in town. They approached the cabin cautiously, spreading out, clearly experienced at this kind of work. Greta's mind raced through options. The truck was blocked in. The forest surrounded them, but running meant leaving the documents behind, the only proof of the council's crimes. The back, the quiet twin whispered. There's a trail. Our mother showed us once, years ago. How do you know this place? We stayed here when we were younger. Before our mother got too sick to travel, they slipped out the back door as the men reached the front. Greta carried the satchel and led the twins into the trees, moving by feel and instinct. Behind them, she heard the cabin door crash open. Shouts of discovery. They had minutes at most before the men organized a search. Greta pushed deeper into the forest, the twins keeping pace with surprising endurance. These children had learned to run. They'd been running all their lives. After 20 minutes of hard travel, they reached a creek bed. Greta stopped listening. No pursuit sounds yet, but that didn't mean they were safe. We can't go back to Ridgemont, she said. They'll be waiting. Where do we go? The speaking twin asked. Greta thought of her cabin on the mountain. Remote, defensible, stocked for a siege, but also isolated, cut off from any help. If the council found them there, no one would hear them call for aid. She thought of her daughter in Ridgemont, living a lie, serving a corrupt system. Lily deserved to know the truth, but revealing it would shatter her world. And she thought of these 2 girls, orphaned and hunted, carrying evidence that could bring down a conspiracy decades in the making. The choice clarified: hide and survive, or fight and expose. Greta had spent 30 years choosing survival. Maybe it was time to choose something else. We're going to Ridgemont, she said. We're going to find Lily Blackwood. And we're going to tell her everything. The twins nodded. faces set with determination beyond their years. In the darkness of the Appalachian forest, 3 generations of stolen children prepared to take back what had been taken from them. The council had operated in shadows for decades. It was time to bring in the light, no matter how many ugly truths it revealed. They couldn't go back to her mother's house. That would be the first place the council would look. Instead, Greta drove to the one person who might offer sanctuary without asking too many questions. Faye Brennan. Faye's house sat on the edge of Ridgemont, a modest cottage with flower boxes and a garden that spoke of someone who still tended things with care, despite the hardness of life. Greta knocked quietly. The twins pressed close behind her in the pre-dawn darkness. Faye opened the door with a pistol in her hand, lowering it when she recognized Greta. Lord have mercy. "Get inside, all of you." They stumbled into the warmth of her living room. Faye locked the door behind them and drew the curtains. "I heard you went up to the property." Kyle called his people, my grandson, though it shames me to say it, and told them you'd found something. "Your mother tried to tell you," Faye said. "Before she passed. She tried to tell you everything." Greta's head snapped up. "What do you mean? I wasn't there when she died." "I know. But she left something for you. The nursing home gave it to me when they cleared out her room. I've been keeping it, waiting for you to come down from that mountain." Faye walked to a closet and pulled out a cardboard box. "I didn't open it. Wasn't my place." Greta took the box with trembling hands. Inside were her mother's final possessions, a few photographs, some jewelry, a hairbrush. And at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, a cassette tape in an old player with a note taped to it. For Greta, the truth. Faye brought over the player and plugged it in. "You need to listen to this. All of you." Greta pressed play, and her mother's voice, weak and wavering but unmistakably hers, filled the small room. "Greta, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I need to tell you what I couldn't say when you ran. What I should have told you years before that, but I was too frightened, too complicit. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." A long pause, the sound of labored breathing. "When you left 30 years ago, you didn't know you were pregnant. You were 6 weeks along when you fled. I found out when I tried to find you, tried to bring you home safely. Brandon discovered it too. He sent men to bring you back, but you'd already disappeared into those mountains like a ghost." Greta's hands clenched into fists. The twins moved closer, flanking her. "I made a deal with him," her mother's voice continued. "I told him I'd give him the location of Violet's refuge if he'd leave you alone, let you have your peace in the wilderness. But there was a condition. When the baby was born, if you had one, it would belong to the council." A sob broke through the recorded voice. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought he'd forget, or you'd never have the child, or something would change. But Brandon never forgets a debt owed. They tracked you through a clinic in the next county. You went there once, sick and desperate, before you learned to be completely self-sufficient. They followed that trail back to your general location. Then they waited for the birth. You gave birth in February of 1995, in that cabin. It was a difficult delivery. There was a midwife, Emma Cord, Samuel's wife, though Samuel never knew she was working for them. They paid her $5,000 to help them take the baby." Greta's vision blurred with tears. "Samuel's wife, the woman who'd been so kind, and so helpful. Another lie? You had a daughter, Greta, 8 pounds, healthy, perfect. But there were complications. You hemorrhaged. Infection set in. For 2 weeks you were delirious with fever, unconscious most of the time. Emma told you when you finally woke that the baby had died, that they'd buried her in the woods while you were sick. You believed her. You were too weak to question. And when you recovered, you shut down that part of yourself completely. I think, and the doctors I spoke to agreed, that the trauma caused your mind to block it out, to forget you'd ever been pregnant at all." The voice paused again, longer this time. "Brandon took your daughter to his cousin in Charleston. Caroline and Brandon Blackwood, wealthy and respectable. They'd been on the council's waiting list for years. They named her Lily. They raised her as their own, and as far as I know, they loved her. But she was stolen from you, Greta, taken while you were helpless. I tried to get her back. God help me, I tried. But by the time I found out what had happened, the Blackwoods had legal papers, all forged but official-looking. And Brandon threatened to have you declared mentally unfit if I made noise. He said he'd have you institutionalized, locked away, where you could never run again. So I stayed quiet. I kept track of Lily through Violet's network. I watched her grow up in photographs. She looked like you, Greta. Same eyes, same fierce spirit. The Blackwoods, they didn't know she'd been stolen. Brandon told them it was a legal private adoption. They thought they were doing everything right. A long, shaking breath. Lily came back to Ridgemont 3 years ago. She joined the sheriff's department, wanting to help people. She doesn't know what this town really is, what her boss's family did, what she's protecting by working there. I tried to tell her once. I went to her office, but when I saw her face, your face, all grown up, I couldn't do it. The dementia was already starting by then. I was afraid she'd think I was just a confused old woman. This is why Stella sent the twins to you. They're your nieces, Greta, Violet's granddaughters. But more than that, they're witnesses. They've lived outside the system like you did. They understand what it means to be stolen. Another pause, this one filled with the sound of crying. Greta, your daughter is alive. She's 30 years old now. She works for Duncan Reeves, whose father was an enforcer for the council, but she doesn't know what they are. She's innocent in all this. If you expose the council, you'll destroy her life. She'll learn her parents stole her, that the man she works for is protecting a trafficking ring, that everything she believed was a lie, but if you don't expose them, they'll keep operating. They'll take more children. The twins will never be safe, and Lily will keep serving a corrupt system, never knowing she's part of the very thing that victimized her. I can't tell you what to do. I gave up that right when I traded Violet's safety for yours, and then lost you both anyway. But I can tell you this, the starling never forgot its song. Neither did I just forgot how to sing it. All the evidence is at the property. Violet collected it for years, and Stella added to it. Everything you need to bring them down. Use it if you have the courage I never had. And tell Lily, tell your daughter, that she was loved, that you never chose to give her up, that you never even knew she existed. Tell her I'm sorry for my part in this. Tell her that sometimes good people do terrible things when they're frightened, and that fear is never an excuse. I love you, Greta. I never stopped. I never stopped looking for you, hoping you'd forgive me someday. I hope you find peace, whatever you decide to do. The tape hissed for a moment longer, then clicked off. Silence filled Faye's living room. Greta sat motionless, tears streaming down her face. 30 years of isolation, of grief she couldn't name, suddenly made sense. She'd been mourning a child she thought had never existed. A loss so profound, her mind had hidden it away completely. I have a daughter, she whispered. You have a daughter, the speaking twin confirmed gently. And we can take you to her. Faye spoke from her chair by the window. Lily Blackwood. She patrols the north end of the county. Good officer by all accounts. Fair, honest. Nothing like the old guard? Does she know about the council? I don't think so. If she did, she wouldn't be working for Duncan. Faye paused. What are you going to do? Greta looked at the satchel full of evidence, at the twins who'd risked everything to bring her this truth, at the recorder that had just revealed her mother's deepest secret. I'm going to meet my daughter, she said, and then I'm going to give her a choice, the comfortable lie she's been living, or the hard truth that will set us all free. The twins nodded. Faces solemn but approving, Faye stood and walked to a drawer, pulling out a cell phone. She'll be starting her shift soon. I'll call her, say I need to report something. That'll bring her here. Then it's up to you how much you tell her. Everything, Greta said. I'm going to tell her everything, because the starling had remembered its song. After 30 years of silence, Greta Wynn was finally ready to sing it, even if the melody shattered everyone's world, including her own. The truth, she'd learned, was never gentle. But it was the only thing worth holding on to in a world built on lies, and somewhere in Ridgemont, a deputy named Lily Blackwood was about to discover that her entire life was one of those lies. The question was, would she have the strength to face the truth? Or would she retreat into the comfortable fiction that had shaped her for 30 years? Greta would find out soon enough. The sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day, a new beginning, or possibly an ending. Either way, there was no going back now. The past had caught up with all of them, and the only way through was forward, into whatever light or darkness that truth would bring. Deputy Lily Blackwood arrived 30 minutes later, parking her cruiser in front of Faye's house with the practiced efficiency of someone who took her job seriously. Through the window, Greta watched her daughter step out, tall, strong, moving with a confidence that came from training and purpose. She looked like her father. That was Greta's first thought, recognizing Brandon Thorne's features in the set of her jaw, the line of her nose. But the eyes were Greta's own, dark and searching, missing nothing. Faye opened the door. "Thank you for coming, Deputy. You said it was urgent, Mrs. Brennan." Lily's voice was professional but kind. "What seems to be the problem?" "It's not my problem exactly. There's someone here who needs to speak with you. About a family matter." Lily's hand drifted toward her service weapon as she stepped inside. "Trained caution." Greta approved even as it made her heart ache. Then their eyes met, and Lily froze. "You're Greta Wynn," she said slowly. Recognition flickered across her face. She'd seen photographs, heard stories. "I heard you were in town for your mother's funeral." "Yes." Greta's voice came out rougher than intended. "But that's not why I asked to see you." Lily's gaze moved to the twins, who sat quietly on the couch, then back to Greta. "What's this about?" "It's about the truth," Greta said. "About who you really are, and what this town has been hiding for 30 years. I don't understand." "You will." "Please, sit down." Greta gestured to a chair. "This is going to be difficult to hear." Lily remained standing, alert but not hostile. "Ma'am, if you have information about a crime, you need to come to the station and file a formal—" "Your boss's father was part of a child trafficking operation," Greta cut in. "They called it the Family Council. They took children from poor families and sold them to wealthy ones, all disguised as private adoption. It operated from the 1960s until at least the 1990s, maybe longer." Lily's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence?" Greta lifted the leather satchel. "Birth certificates, financial ledgers, legal documents, all of it documented by women who were trying to stop it." She paused. "Women like my mother's sister Violet and her daughter Stella." And she couldn't finish. The words caught in her throat. The speaking twin stood up, her young voice clear and steady. "And you, Deputy Blackwood, you were one of the children they took." Lily's face went pale. "What?" "You were taken from your birth mother in 1995, the quiet twin added. "Placed with Brandon and Caroline Blackwood through illegal means. They didn't know it was illegal. They were told it was a proper adoption. But it wasn't." "That's ridiculous," Lily said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I have adoption papers. My parents showed me." "Forged," Greta said quietly. "Your birth was never properly registered. Your adoption was never legally processed. The papers you have are fiction." Lily looked around the room, at Greta, at the twins, at Faye, who sat with tears streaming down her face, and seemed to realize this wasn't a conspiracy theory or delusion. "These people believed what they were saying. Who was my birth mother?" she asked. Greta stood, moving closer. "Me. I'm your mother, Lily. You were taken from me 30 years ago while I was unconscious from illness. They told me you died. I only learned the truth 3 days ago." The silence stretched like broken glass, sharp and dangerous. Lily shook her head slowly. "No, that's not. My parents would have told me." "They wouldn't have. Your parents were victims too," Greta said. "They were told it was legal. Brandon Thorne arranged it. He's your biological father's cousin, and he was one of the council leaders." "Brandon Thorne." Recognition sparked in Lily's eyes. "The real estate developer?" "Yes, and your biological father," Greta's voice cracked. "And was his cousin Brandon as well. We were engaged once. Before I found out what his family was doing." Lily sat down hard, her professional composure cracking. "This is insane." "I know how it sounds," Greta said. "But look at me. Really look." Lily raised her eyes, and Greta saw the moment understanding dawned. The same eyes staring back at her, the same bone structure, The resemblance was undeniable once you were looking for it. "No," Lily whispered, "I have proof." Greta opened the satchel and pulled out the birth certificate. Born March 15th, 1995. Female infant, 8 pounds, 6 ounces. Mother, Greta Wynn. Placed with Brandon and Caroline Blackwood. Payment received, $35,000. Lily took the certificate with shaking hands, examining it closely. As a law enforcement officer, she'd seen enough legal documents to recognize authenticity, and enough fake ones to recognize the subtle signs of forgery in the adoption papers she'd been given. "Why?" she asked, voice breaking. "Why take a baby? Why lie?" "Money," the speaking twin said. "The council made millions over the years, taking children from families they deemed unworthy and placing them with families they deemed appropriate. And control," Faye added. "The children placed became leverage over the wealthy families who received them. It created a network of complicity. Everyone had something to hide." Lily stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. "My parents, Caroline and Brandon, they've been dead 5 years. Car accident. They never told me any of this." "They probably didn't know," Greta said. "Most of the receiving families were kept ignorant. That way their love for the children was genuine. Their legal defense was built in. We didn't know is a powerful protection." Lily stopped pacing, turning to face Greta with a cop's direct gaze. "If this is true, why are you telling me now? Why not 30 years ago?" "Because I didn't know. I was told you died at birth. My mind blocked out the entire pregnancy. Trauma-induced amnesia. I've spent 30 years on a mountain, not knowing I'd lost a child because I didn't remember having one." Greta's voice hardened. "And when I finally learned the truth 3 days ago, I had to decide, destroy your life with the truth or let you live in a comfortable lie. You chose the truth." "I did. Because these girls," Greta gestured to the twins, "they're still in danger. The council still operates, still wants them. And because you deserve to know who you really are, even if it hurts." Lily absorbed this, her face cycling through emotions, disbelief, anger, grief. Finally, she focused on the twins. "Who are you? What's your connection?" "We're your cousins," the speaking twin said. "Our mother was Stella, daughter of Violet. Violet was Greta's mother's sister. That makes us family. And the council wants us," the quiet twin added. "They've been hunting us since our mother died. They want to silence us because we know too much." Lily's jaw tightened, her cop instincts overriding her emotional turmoil. "Where are your parents now?" "Dead," both twins said in unison. "We're orphans. And you came to Greta because she's the only one who escaped," the speaking twin explained. "The only one who fought back and got away. Our mother said if anyone could protect us and expose the council, it would be her." Lily turned back to Greta. "You said Sheriff Reeves is involved." "His father was." "Duncan himself?" Greta paused. "I don't know. He warned me to leave town, to take the girls and disappear. That could mean he's trying to protect us or trying to protect the council." "Duncan's not corrupt," Lily said firmly. "I've worked with him for 3 years. He's honest. His father was an enforcer for the council," Faye said quietly. "Took children from their mothers personally. Duncan may not be involved, but he knows about it. And he's chosen to keep it quiet." Lily's expression darkened. "Covering up crimes is still a crime. So what are you going to do?" Greta asked. "You're a deputy. Your boss is compromised. The local system can't be trusted. We're sitting here with evidence of decades of trafficking and nowhere safe to take it." Lily was quiet for a long moment, her training and her emotions warring visibly. Finally, she pulled out her phone. "I have a contact at the FBI, Civil Rights Division. I worked with him on a case last year." "The FBI," Greta echoed, hope rising. "If what you're saying is true, and I need to see all the evidence before I commit to that, this is federal jurisdiction. Trafficking, racketeering, falsification of federal documents. The FBI will be very interested." Lily met Greta's eyes. "But I need everything. Every document, every name, every piece of evidence you have." Greta handed over the satchel. "It's all here. 30 years of documentation." Lily spread the contents across Faye's coffee table and began examining them with professional scrutiny. As she worked, her expression grew darker. "Birth certificates, financial records, a ledger of payments, correspondence between council members discussing placements and acquisitions. This is... She stopped, shaking her head. This is monstrous. Yes, Greta said simply. And you're saying my entire life is built on this? That I was stolen? You were loved, Greta said. By the Blackwoods, genuinely. But yes, you were stolen from me. From us, she gestured to herself and the twins. We're your family. Your real family. And we've all been victims of the same system. Lily's hands trembled as she held her own falsified birth certificate. I need time to process this. We don't have time, the speaking twin said. They know we found the evidence. They'll come for us. Who will? Kyle Brennan and others, Greta explained. They followed us to the property last night. We barely escaped. They know we have these documents, Lily stood, her decision made. Then we move now. I'll call my FBI contact, arrange an emergency meeting. We get this evidence into federal hands before anyone can stop us. She looked at Greta, pain and determination mixing in her eyes. And then, after this is over, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about everything. I'd like that, Greta said softly. Lily made the call, stepping outside for privacy. Through the window, Greta watched her daughter's back, the rigid set of her shoulders, as she spoke to the federal agent. 30 years separated, 30 years lost. But maybe, possibly, they'd found each other in time to make something new from the broken pieces. When Lily returned, her face was set with professional resolve. Agent Torres is 3 hours away. She's coming to Ridgemont personally. We're meeting at the old courthouse. It's been closed for renovations, so it's private and secure. When? Tonight, 7 o'clock. Lily looked at all of them. Until then, you stay here. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except me. I'm going back to the station to maintain appearances, but I'll have my phone. Any trouble, you call. What about Duncan? Faye asked. I'll handle him, Lily said grimly. If he's protecting these people, he's about to find out that Badge doesn't make him untouchable. She left, and the house fell quiet. Greta sat with the twins on either side of her, waiting for evening to come. Waiting for the moment when truth would finally be spoken in places that mattered to people with the power to act. The council had operated in darkness for decades. Tonight, they'd face the light at last, and whatever came after, whatever consequences, whatever pain, whatever justice, it would be built on truth instead of lies. Greta thought about her mother's final message. The starling never forgot its song, she'd remembered. And now, she was going to make sure everyone else remembered too. The hours crawled toward 7 o'clock. Greta kept watch at the window, her mountain-trained eyes scanning for threats. The twins sat together on the couch, speaking in their whispered language. Faye made sandwiches that no one ate. At 6:30, Lily called. Change of plans. Meet me at the old Masonic Hall on Jefferson Street instead. Agent Torres wants to see the scene where council meetings were held. Bring everything. Greta felt a chill of warning. The Masonic Hall. I thought we were meeting at the courthouse. Torres requested the change. She wants to document the physical space for the investigation. Something felt wrong, but Greta couldn't articulate what. All right, we'll be there. They loaded into Faye's car, Greta's truck too recognizable now. The drive through Ridgemont felt surreal, passing familiar streets she'd avoided for 30 years. The town had aged like she had, worn down, weathered, hanging on to relevance that had slipped away decades ago. The Masonic Hall stood at the edge of the downtown, a 3-story brick building that had seen better days. Lily's cruiser was parked out front, but no other vehicles were visible. Where's the FBI? The speaking twin asked. Maybe they're inside already, Greta said, but doubt gnawed at her. They entered through the front door, which hung open. The interior was dark, lit only by emergency exit signs that cast everything in a sickly green glow. Their footsteps echoed on worn wooden floors. Lily? Greta called. Down here. Her daughter's voice came from the basement stairs. The meeting room is in the cellar. Greta descended first, the twins close behind. The basement opened into a large room with a conference table, chairs arranged around it, and walls lined with filing cabinets. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly as if someone had just passed through. Lily stood at the far end of the room, but she wasn't alone. Duncan Reeves stood beside her, his face grave, and behind them, emerging from shadows, were 3 more men, including Brandon Thorne. Greta's hand flew to the satchel, pulling it close. "Lily, get away." From them, but Lily's expression was cold, professional, distant. "Put the satchel on the table, Greta." "What?" "The documents." "Put them down." Greta's mind raced. This was a trap. Lily had called them here, had... No. Understanding crashed through her. "You didn't call me earlier?" "Someone else did." Brandon stepped forward, holding up a phone. "We've been monitoring police communications. When Lily called her FBI contact, we knew we had to act fast." He smiled, the same charming smile Greta remembered from 30 years ago. "She's at the station right now, probably wondering where you all went." Duncan spoke quietly. "I tried to warn you, Greta. I told you to leave town." "You're protecting them," Greta said bitterly. "I'm protecting my son," Duncan corrected. "The boy I raised. The boy they gave me. If this comes out, he loses everything," Brandon finished. "His family, his identity, his father's reputation. Just like Lily would have lost. That's why we're offering you a choice." Greta positioned herself between the men and the twins. "What choice?" "Give us the documents. Take the girls and go back to your mountain. We'll pay you enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. The twins get new identities, placement with a good family. Everyone gets what they need, except justice," the speaking twin said. Brandon's smile faded. "Justice is a luxury. Survival is a necessity. Those children we placed, including Lily, they had better lives because of us. We took kids from squalor and gave them opportunities." "You stole them," Greta said. "We saved them," Brandon countered. "And now you want to destroy dozens of families, traumatize dozens of children who've grown into adults. All for what?" "Revenge. For truth," Greta said. "Truth is overrated." Brandon gestured to his men. "Last chance, Greta. The documents, or we take them." Greta's hand moved to her pocket, where she'd put a small knife. "Mountain habits." But 3 men, Duncan armed with his service weapon. She couldn't fight them all. "The documents aren't here," the quiet twin said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "What?" The Brandon's composure cracked slightly. "We made copies," the speaking twin added. "Left them with someone safe. If anything happens to us, they go to the media. It was a bluff." They hadn't made copies. But the twins delivered it with perfect calm, perfect certainty. Brandon studied them, trying to assess truth from fiction. "You're lying, are we?" the quiet twin asked. "You took our mother. You took Greta's baby. You've been stealing children for decades. Do you really think we'd come here without protection?" A long, tense silence, then footsteps on the stairs above. Someone coming down. Multiple someones. Brandon's face went white. "What did you do?" The basement door burst open and Lily appeared, the real Lily, with her weapon drawn. Behind her, 3 people in FBI windbreakers. "Federal agents," one of them announced. "Everyone on the ground, now!" But Brandon moved faster than Greta expected, lunging for the satchel in her arms. She twisted away, and one of his men grabbed for the twins. The room exploded into chaos. Greta threw the satchel toward Lily as Brandon's hands closed on her shoulders. Lily caught it with one hand, her weapon trained on the room with the other. The FBI agents moved in, separating council members from victims with practiced efficiency. Brandon released Greta and made a desperate lunge toward Duncan. "Do something. You're the sheriff." Duncan stepped back, hands raised. "It's over, Brandon. I called them. I set this up." The betrayal registered on Brandon's face. My father made me complicit in something evil," Duncan said, his voice tight with emotion. "I've spent 20 years trying to justify it, telling myself the children we placed were better off. But they weren't better off. They were stolen. And I'm done protecting that lie." Agent Torres, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, took control. "Brandon Thorne, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit child trafficking, falsification of federal documents, and racketeering." She nodded to her colleagues, who moved in with handcuffs. Brandon struggled, then went limp as the metal clicked around his wrists. "You don't understand what you're destroying. Those children were not yours to take," Lily said coldly. She'd moved to stand beside Greta, the satchel clutched to her chest. "You stole them! You stole me!" Brandon looked at her, and for a moment something like regret crossed his face. "We gave you a good life, Lily. The Blackwoods loved you." "That doesn't make it right," Lily said. "Love built on lies isn't real love. It's just another form of theft." The other council members were being handcuffed, read their rights, led up the stairs. Only Duncan remained free, standing apart from both groups, alone in the middle ground. "What happens to him?" Greta asked Agent Torres. "That depends on what he's willing to testify to," Torres said, "and what role he played in the ongoing operation." Duncan met Greta's eyes. "I never took a child. My father did that, but I knew about it. I kept quiet. His voice broke. "I kept quiet because my son would have been taken from me if I spoke up. They had leverage over everyone." "Your son," Greta said quietly, "deserves to know the truth too." Duncan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know, and I'll tell him. After this is over, I'll tell him everything." Agent Torres gestured to her team. "Clear the room. We need to process this as a crime scene." They filed up the stairs, Greta, the twins, Lily, Duncan trailing behind. Outside, the street had filled with police vehicles, news vans already arriving despite the late hour. Word traveled fast in small towns. Lily kept the twins close, protective instinct overriding everything else. Greta watched her daughter's face, seeing her own determination reflected there. Whatever had been stolen from them, whatever years had been lost, they'd both survived. And that survival meant something. "I need statements from all of you," Torres said. "But that can wait until morning. For now," she looked at the twins, "we need to arrange temporary protective custody for the children." "No," both twins said in unison. "They stay with me," Greta said firmly. "I'm family. I'm capable." "And they've been through enough without being put in another system," Torres assessed her. "You live off-grid, no permanent address, no employment history for 30 years. I've survived alone in the mountains for 3 decades, Greta interrupted. "I can protect 2 children better than any foster system." "She's also their aunt," Lily added. "And she's right. They've been running from the system their whole lives. Putting them into state custody would be traumatizing." Torres considered this. "Temporary arrangement? Subject to follow-up from social services." "Agreed." Greta nodded, pulling the twins close. They leaned into her, finally allowing themselves to relax after weeks of running and fear. "What happens now?" the speaking twin asked. "To the other children? The ones who were taken?" "We'll try to locate them," Torres said gently. "Some will want to know the truth. Others—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "Others may prefer not to have their lives disrupted. We'll approach each case individually, with sensitivity, but they deserve to know," the quiet twin insisted. "Even if it hurts, they deserve the truth." "Yes," Torres agreed. "They do." Brandon was led past them in handcuffs, flanked by agents. He looked diminished now, an old man facing consequences he'd evaded for decades. He didn't look at any of them, just stared straight ahead, as if by not acknowledging them, he could make this all disappear. But it wouldn't disappear. The truth was out now, recorded in federal documents, preserved in evidence bags, about to be spread across news channels and courtrooms. The council was finished. Greta turned to Lily, meeting her daughter's eyes. "Are you all right?" "No," Lily said honestly. "But I will be, eventually." She touched Greta's arm tentatively. "We have a lot to talk about. 30 years of catching up. We have time now," Greta said. "All the time we need." The twins stood between them, linking the generations. 3 generations of stolen children, finally free to tell their stories. Finally free to reclaim their names, their histories, their songs. The starling had remembered. And in remembering, had taught others to remember too. In the distance, sirens wailed as more arrests were made across the county. Council members pulled from their homes, their offices, their comfortable lives built on others' suffering. Justice, slow and imperfect, but justice nonetheless. Greta looked up at the mountains that had sheltered her, dark shapes against the stars. She would return there eventually, but not to hide. To heal, to build something new with her daughter, with her nieces, with family she'd never known she had. The past was finally past. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but honest, and that was enough. 3 months later, winter settled over the Smoky Mountains with a gentleness that felt like forgiveness. Greta's cabin had changed. The single room had been expanded with a new addition, built with Lily's help during weekends off from her new job with the FBI field office. 2 beds for the twins, their own space in a home that finally felt permanent. The girls, no longer just the twins, but Anna and Sophie, names they'd chosen for themselves after weeks of consideration, had filled out. Regular meals, safety, and the knowledge that no one was hunting them anymore had transformed them from hollow-eyed waifs into the children they should have been all along. Greta stood at the stove, preparing dinner as the girls worked on their correspondence school assignments at the table. They decided against traditional school for now, still adjusting to visibility after years of hiding. But they were learning, growing, finding their voices. A knock at the door announced Lily's arrival. She'd driven up after her shift, making the treacherous mountain roads with increasing confidence. The 3-hour journey had become a weekly ritual, sometimes more when cases allowed. "Something smells good," Lily said, stomping snow from her boots. "Venison stew," Greta replied, stirring the pot. "The girls helped prepare it. We tracked the deer," Anna said proudly. "Greta's teaching us to read signs. And to shoot," Sophie added. "Though, she says, we're not ready for hunting yet." Lily hung up her coat and joined them at the table, spreading out documents from her briefcase. "I have news. The investigation reached its final phase today." Greta poured coffee, then sat down. "Tell us!" "Brandon Thorne and 6 other council leaders are facing federal charges," Lily began. "Trafficking, racketeering, falsification of documents. The trials start in spring." And she paused, emotion flickering across her face. "We've identified 47 children who were taken over 35 years. Have you contacted them?" Greta asked. 23 so far. "Some want to reconnect with biological families. Others," Lily's voice softened, "others are choosing to maintain their current lives. We're respecting those decisions. What about Duncan?" Anna asked. She'd developed a fascination with justice, with how systems worked and failed. He negotiated immunity in exchange for testimony. "He's cooperating fully, and he's been meeting with his son to explain everything." Lily paused. "It's destroying the kid, honestly. But Duncan says he'd rather his son hate him for truth than love him for lies." Sophie nodded solemnly. "That's brave." "It is," Lily agreed. They ate dinner together, conversation flowing naturally now. The awkwardness of those first weeks had faded, replaced by genuine connection. Greta watched her daughter across the table, still marveling at the miracle of her existence, still grieving the 30 years they'd lost, but learning to focus on what they had, rather than what had been taken. After dinner, Lily pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "I brought you something. All of you." She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a quilt. Not just any quilt, a patchwork of fabrics in different colors and patterns, each square distinct but unified into something beautiful. "I've been working on it for months," Lily explained, "with help from Faye Brennan. This square," she pointed to a faded blue fabric, "is from a dress that belonged to Violet. Faye had kept it all these years. And this, a red flannel, is from one of your old shirts, Greta. This green piece is from a scarf that belonged to Stella. The girls gave it to me. And this white piece is from my baby blanket, the one I was wrapped in when the Blackwoods received me." Tears streamed down Greta's face as she touched the fabric. 4 generations stitched together. Loss and love combined into something that would keep them warm. "It's perfect," she whispered. The girls crowded close, running their fingers over the different textures. "It's our family," Anna said. "All the parts that got broken," Sophie added. "Put back together." Lily wrapped the quilt around all of them, and they stood together in the cabin's golden lamplight. 4 women bound by blood and trauma, and the choice to heal together. "I've been thinking," Lily said, "about the cabin, the one where Violet and Stella stayed. The refuge. What about it?" Greta asked. "I want to keep it running. Not just as a memorial, but as an actual safe house. For women and children escaping abuse, trafficking, situations where the system can't or won't help them." Lily's eyes shone with purpose. An off-the-books refuge, the way it was meant to be. That's a beautiful idea, Greta said. I'll help, Anna offered immediately. We both will, Sophie agreed. They spent the evening planning, voices rising and falling with excitement and determination. The legacy wouldn't be one of theft and silence anymore. It would be one of protection and truth. When the girls finally went to bed, Greta and Lily sat by the fire, the quilt spread across their laps. I visited the Blackwoods' graves last week, Lily said quietly. Told them I forgave them. They didn't know what they were part of. They loved me as best they could. That's generous of you. I learned it from watching you with Anna and Sophie. You could be angry. You have every right to be angry. But instead, you're teaching them to survive and thrive. You're giving them what was taken from us, choice. Greta took her daughter's hand. We can't get back what was stolen. Those 30 years are gone. But we can choose what we build from here. I keep thinking about what Grandma Margaret said, Lily murmured. About the starling forgetting its song, then remembering. We remembered, Greta said. All of us. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the mountains in white. The cabin glowed warm against the darkness, a beacon of safety in the wilderness. Inside, 4 women slept under a quilt made from the fragments of their shattered pasts, pieced together into something whole. The next morning, Greta woke early and walked to the ridge overlooking the valley. The sun rose over the peaks, painting everything gold. From here she could see for miles the mountains that had hidden her, the valleys that had threatened her, the world that had taken so much but had finally returned something precious. She thought of her mother's letter, the starling's song. She thought of Violet running into these mountains 50 years ago, of Stella protecting her daughters until her last breath, of Anna and Sophie, brave enough to trust a stranger at a graveside, of Lily, strong enough to choose truth over comfortable fiction. 4 generations of women, each fighting in their own way, each refusing to let the darkness win. The starling had remembered its song, and in remembering had taught others to sing. Greta turned back toward the cabin where her daughter and her nieces waited, where breakfast would be made and lessons would be taught and laughter would echo through rooms that had known too much silence. The past was past. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but honest, and for the first time in 30 years, Greta Wynn felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope, not for what had been lost, but for what could still be built, not for revenge, but for healing, not for isolation, but for connection. The mountain woman had come down from her peak and found family waiting, had traded solitude for belonging, had exchanged silence for truth, and in that exchange had discovered that what she thought she'd lost forever, her heart, her hope, her song, had been waiting all along, buried but not dead, ready to be remembered when the time was right. The time was right now. The starling sang, and in the mountains of Appalachia, a family broken by lies began to heal through truth. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one song at a time, together.